All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Welcome to our IMBIS AMA. For those of you that are new, this is the IMBIS AMA Ask Me Anything series, and it's presented by the International Mind, Brain, and Education Trainee Board with the aim of building connections among IMBIS trainees and non-trainee practitioners and researchers to support the translation of research into policy and practice. It's also our effort to expand our community and welcome new names and faces into this space. So if this is your first IMBIS event, welcome. If you find this interesting and want to share it with someone, please do. We can just introduce ourselves really quickly. My name is Kristen Simmers. I am one of the co-presidents for the IMBIS Trainee Board and also a PhD student in learning sciences at the University of Connecticut. Other board members, you want to introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Gilmore. I am the trainee board chair for policy and practice, and happy to be here. I'm also at the University of Connecticut doing a PhD in learning sciences, a former teacher. So very, very interested to hear Tracey talk today.
Hi all, my name is Anna. I am the research chair for the IMBIS Trainee Board, and I'm currently doing a PhD in school psychology at Fordham University.
Hi, I'm Verani Men. I am a secretary on the trainee board, and I'm currently a practicing school psychologist in Oregon.
Okay, I think that's everyone we have with us for now. So the way these AMA sessions work is they are recorded and they'll be shared on our YouTube channel later. So you can watch out for that announcement on Twitter and on our website. But if you've registered, which you have if you're here, you'll also receive an email with a link to the recording and also the resources that Tracey is going to mention in her talk. We'll also share a link directly in the chat for those as well. We do have 2 ASL interpreters here today, and live transcription is enabled, so please take advantage of those services if they're helpful to you. We'll start with a short 15-minute presentation from our speaker, Dr. Tracey Tokuhama-Espinosa, on her work, followed by a 15-minute facilitated discussion, and at the end will be our 15-minute open AMA portion. So please, throughout the talk, put your questions in the chat. The whole team will be noting them down, and then your chance to ask will be at the end of the session. And just a little vocabulary clarification. I'm sure Tracey will touch on this, but when we say MBE, we're talking about mind-brain education. You'll see it on the slide there. And if we know that there are some new people in the group, so if there's any jargon that we use, please feel free to ask, and we will clarify as quickly as possible. So to introduce our speaker, Dr. Tracey Tokuhama-Espinosa is an MBE enthusiast, instructor at the Harvard University Extension School in the course Neuroscience of Learning, an Introduction to Mind, Brain, Health, and Education, the author of many, many books, a researcher and associate editor of Nature partner journal Science of Learning. She's an international consultant, educational consultant, and conducts workshops for parents, teachers, and educational professionals on themes of language acquisition, brain development, critical thinking, and teaching methodologies. She's worked with dozens of schools around the world, a very long list of countries that we don't need to mention them all, but she also works with the European Council of International Schools, the East Asia Regional Council of Overseas Schools, and the Association of American Schools of Central America, Colombia, Caribbean, and Mexico, among many other things. So Tracey, thank you so much for being here today, and now's your time.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you guys for all being here, and thank you for the invitation to share. I invite you all to take down my email and also the website, thelearningsciences.com, in case you want access to other resources. And I will also be sharing a QR code in about 2 slides where you can have all the slides from today and also some of the bigger graphs that I'm going to be sharing with you right now. I just want to take a few minutes to go over this main focus that we have, which is a lot of people, Kristen included, Sarah, how come this field is taking so long to take off? Why isn't it in everybody's educational program? Why doesn't teacher formation include this more regularly? I'm here right now in Spain at a huge professor conference, university professor conference, and I am the keynote was Pooja Agrawal, who does, powerful teaching and talks a lot about recall and memory. And myself, we were the only ones, though, of all of these hundreds of presentations that were going on, that had anything to do with neuroscience. And our sessions were absolutely packed. I mean, people are desperate for the information, but it does not seem to have been formalized as a strand in big conferences or as something that's typically taught in schools. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about where that comes from. So if you are okay with this, and then, sorry, what I did want to promise is that I am going to provide resources related to looking at the myths that still really exist in a lot of teacher education literature, and also basic core principles and tenets. Why is it that we cannot agree on what it is that we can share with teachers? And I want to share the evidence that I have gathered to see if we can come to some kind of an agreement about what should be shared with everybody around the world. So today, I'm going to give you a teeny bit of background about what I do, just because it's, ask me anything and you need to know who I am to be able to talk about these things. And then I want to share a little bit about the whole evolution of this field of mind, brain, and what I have added, or what we've added at the course at Harvard, is health, mental and physical health and well-being to the educational sciences. And I just want to give you my take on what I think is happening and, the speed of development of this field. Where does it come from? Since it was born officially with INBIS being born in 2007, where are we now that it's 2023? How come we're not fully established yet? And then from there, give some specific recommendations for you as learning scientists. So those of you who are teachers, how do you sort of wear this more official hat that crosses all of these boundaries? And so I'm going to take a few minutes just to give you my take on this, and then I would love to engage with you guys about all these different ideas. As of yesterday, I'm also teaching at Harvard College, which is so cool. I'm going to do the summer school there and the extension school. I've worked with the OECD expert panel with Daniel Ansari, trying to look at teachers' new pedagogical knowledge and why it needs to include more technology and information about neuroscience. I currently work as one of the associate editors at Nature Partner Journal Science of Learning. So if any of you are doing some cool research, I'd love to hear about it. And I do a lot of research in this field. The most recent book I have coming out in April is Questions Kids Ask About Their Own Brains, which is so fun because it's 600 questions from kids in 21 countries around the world. And what did they want to know about their own brains? Which was great because it's things that adults don't even know about their own brains. So it's a fun thing to share. And I've worked with teachers all around the world, from kindergarten all the way through university. Here's the short answer. Why hasn't MBE made its way into more teacher training? I think there's 4 huge elements. One is the times that we live in, the complexity of the field, building consensus and leadership. And that's the short answer. The long answer, if you want to take a picture of the QR code, there's a lot more files and some graphics that I'm going to be sharing with you to sort of go into this. But I'm going to do a slide or two on, oops. Gabriel S.B. California. Sorry, that's my son. Sorry, Gabriel. So, and then give a slide or two on each of these different ideas and sort of open that up to any kind of follow-up conversation you guys want to have, okay? So in terms of timing, there's a wonderful timeline. Where has mind-brain education come from? Oh dear. Where has mind-brain education come from over the past 3,000 years, basically? And we actually did this. I had some feedback from a lot of really cool people like David Daniel and a lot of Mary Helen, everybody down Akash jumped in and said, well, how come you haven't included certain things in certain books, certain ideas, certain concepts, certain big conceptual changes that have led to our current field right now? And with that in mind, we developed a timeline that goes all the way to the present. Which is really fun because it sort of showed us what the things we were anchoring our core ideas on, where the development of the field had actually come from historically. So I invite you to have a look at that. But the other thing coming up to more, recent history, Mark Schwartz, who's one of the former presidents of the International Mind-Brain Education Society, we had a long discussion about whether or not MBE was a field or not, or what was it, or was it a discipline? And the consensus there was that you had to have research, practice, and policy goals in order to be a field. And MBES has, I mean, mind-brain education has that. And in fact, in my doctoral thesis in 2008, we published the first draft of what kind of research practice and policy goals we should have. And then we put it to the test with 112 researchers from different countries in 2020, and they confirmed or modified or tweaked some of those goals. So those exist. It also exists that you need to have a society, which we do, and we need to have a conference, a regular meeting place, and a journal. And all of those things exist, which is pretty cool. So we meet all the criteria for being an official field that should be promoted more regularly within education. So my question to you is, if these all exist, why aren't they better known? And so I'm going to take a stab at some of that, and you guys can try to add to that. I think part of it is the complexity of the field, and for 4 reasons. This is a huge international movement, and that means it's a big monster to move, right? It's transdisciplinary in the way we approach information. We use information at multi-level analysis, big data from, you know, molecular sciences all the way into comparative policy things. And it's translational. You need to actually get language moving from different subfields going. And so if we look at this at the level of transdisciplinarity, one of the things that's really very interesting is that there was a huge conscientious decision by the original founders of Mind, Brain, and Education to use mind, comma, brain, comma, and education in order to make an even playing field. Because when you had educational neuroscience, that was a subfield. Education is a subfield of neuroscience. Or neuropsychology, neuro is a subfield of psychology. But when you use the commas, everybody's even. And so the idea was you were going to have equal input from all of these fields into the formation of understanding the learning sciences for the betterment of teaching. And so that was a very conscientious decision, but it's clunky. No other fields have 3 elements. So everybody else has 2, which makes it really hard for people to identify with the field, because it's a harder name to pronounce and it's more difficult to explain. But this also brought with it another complication. Where do you get evidence that this works? Is it just the collective? If you find something in psychology, does it apply to MBE, or neuroscience, does it apply to MBE, or is it just the intersection? And what hopefully I have made an argument for in this book that just came out about in May this year. I have a chapter that talks about a new science of teaching that looks at where evidence for mind-brain education comes from. And basically there's 6 different types of evidence. There's things that come from neurotransfer studies, things that are equivalency studies, that people talk about the same thing, they just don't know they're talking about the same thing, like growth mindsets is basically neuroplasticity, but people don't, you know, use that, they don't see that equivalency in their head. There's untransferred studies, like things that we know benefit learning, but we don't condone in schools. Things that are complex designs, when they're executed well, they have great interventions. Or far transfer studies, things that we have evidence for in, for example, in education, but we might not necessarily have them in other fields. And then other things that are low-hanging fruit that just have to do with teacher attitude towards shifting their practice a teeny bit. And these lead to some very well-documented, literally hundreds of evidence-based research papers that would support a lot of these teaching interventions. But we know all of these things, but it's complicated. It's not like you're getting information only directly from neuroscience to education, which is the big criticism. There's nothing from neuroscience that can inform education. Well, there is now. There's interleaving, there's low stakes testing. There's a lot of stuff that does exist, direct transfer, near transfer studies, but there's other information that we get from other sciences as well. The other complication is that we're looking at things at a molecular level, an individual level, a classroom level. So you're looking at neurons and kids and classrooms and international comparative studies. And so this big data on multi-levels makes it very hard for us to advance the field without doing these huge comparative studies around the world at different levels of analysis. So taking all of that into consideration, in 2017, the OECD member countries wrote recommendations for teachers' new pedagogical knowledge, and they suggested that we had to have more neuroscience and just more information about technology and how that changes the brain. So before it was just if you knew your subject, you could be a great teacher. Then it was in the 1980s, no, you need to know your subject and you need to have good pedagogical knowledge. How do you teach math as a math teacher, right? Then in around 2004, 2006, we had TPAC, you had to have technology. In 2007, we added this element that you actually have to know how the brain works. And if you do that and put everything in context, in your cultural context, then you could be a learning scientist. And that was the really cool information that was out there. So this led us to this final thing. And I hope all of you will download this list and then critique it and give me your own favorites. But I asked people, I was asked by a teacher, an administrator at a school who's trying to get her entire school to move towards mind-brain education. She goes, what could I get my teachers to read? And I said, here's the 100 top books. And then it became 101, and now it's about 120 because I sent it out to everybody, asking them, what would you take off this list? What would you add onto this list? And I got a lot of good feedback from a lot of different people. And for the most part, have added what I could. And with the people who were recommending things that I would just say, stay away from that, I had little discussions about why I would not include certain books. And that was really healthy for the field to keep advancing what would be our current state of the art knowledge. The third point and the fourth point is really quick, consensus. We just don't have a lot of consensus because this is such a nice group of people. They're all like Kristen. Everybody's so humble. It's like, oh no, you go, you go. It's like having, I love this thing. It's like having Canadian lemmings. No, you go first. Oh no, you go first. No, you can go ahead. It's like nobody wants to step on anybody's toes and say, well, I'll lead. I'm a neuroscientist, I'll lead. I'm a psychologist, I'll lead. A lot of people are very humbly saying, well, I'm not sure I have the expertise in all of these fields to lead. And that humility is keeping people from running and being in these leadership roles. We also know because of it, building consensus is hard. You know, the more cooks you have in the kitchen, the more you end up with just like lukewarm water is basically, or, you know, what you get when you try to make a recipe with everybody. If it's just one person running the show, you can just make that by yourself, or a family, or if you just have a neighborhood or cities or states. My husband is an ambassador to the United Nations. It's the slowest dinosaur in the world. The bigger you are, the more international you are, the harder it is to get consensus. And that's one of the reasons that slowed the field. I've done 3 different Delphis over the past 17 years. The information has not changed that much. We get bigger, we include more countries and all the rest of that, but there's more myths, there's more junk out there as well lately, because a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Our technology gets better and people start to overgeneralize findings, and they have a lot of, there's a lot of myths out there as well. And so anyways, this waters down the findings. In a recent paper we just had come out a couple months ago in Mind-Brain Education, there's 18 recommendations of things that we'd say to teachers, but everybody, you know, that I know who's a serious person in the field reads it and they say, well, we already knew that. It's like, I know, but consensus says you can only say the stuff that's already known, which is really horrible, right? And so that means that this isn't really the right way to go. So what we really need is better leadership. And I'm just going to lay that out there because I'm counting on you guys, all you young faces out there. Initially, when the field was born, when I was doing my thesis in 2006, and I interviewed Kurt Fisher and Howard Gardner and all these original leaders here, and then we did the first Delphi and only had 21 people on it. But when I presented my results in the early conference in Europe, they said, oh, but your panel is all just too Harvard. This is just a degree that you guys have. It's not a real field, which was a really interesting thing. So, well, then who should lead, right? Which is interesting. Then IMBIS, IMBIS, like any other organization, is run by the goodness and the goodwill of you guys giving your time. You are all doing this extra on top of other stuff. So you don't have somebody who posts as a candidate, gets paid to do a great job and makes this 100% their full-time job. So we don't have that happening. We also have sort of run dry on who the natural leaders would already be. You know, people like Mary Helen, who was a student of Kurt Fisher's and all the rest of it and went through this whole thing, is super into the mind-brain education thing, would, you know, she's already been president. And so there's people who have already done their time But we need fresh faces to sort of match this. And finally, I guess the most difficult thing is everybody, it's very hard. People are formed because there's very few people in mind-brain education getting degrees in mind-brain education, that you're getting people out of Johns Hopkins with mind-brain in teaching, which is close, but you're not getting mind-brain education. So most everybody else who leads the field says, oh yes, and I'm a psychologist, or oh yes, I'm an educator. And so we watered down the entire point of having a field that was transdisciplinary in the first place. Okay, so what are the solutions? Here's my last slide. It's basically, if time is your hang up, you know, it's taken so long for this to move, we can either just wait because it's actually normal. Do you know how long it takes for fields to form? Normally, it takes generations, 60 or 70 years before something gets solidified as a field of study, right? Or we can speed it up because we now have better technology. We can share messages faster. We can get things around the world quicker. We can share information. And so maybe it's up to us to sort of do that. In terms of complexity, I just say embrace it. It has given us much better, far better diagnostic tools and interventions to have this transdisciplinary vision, even though it's harder. It's much harder, but it's much better. And the only thing I can say is, you know, sorry if you want it easy, this is the wrong field to be in. It's not easy, but it's better. And if we want consensus, I would just say, and I will share with you what I would hope we could all agree on, at least, that there are some neuromyths we have to get rid of. And then there's some basic principles and tenets and guidelines. And I can show you a dozen other people's books that support exactly the same information, but everybody thinks they have their own model. And I'm happy to give up my model to take on anybody else's, so long as we can just agree that we have things that we could work around, right? Finally, on the leadership call, we have a real problem with this dichotomy. We think that if you have a leader, everybody else is following. And that is totally, it's a viewpoint that you have in many places around the world. It's totally not an American viewpoint, though. The American viewpoint is everybody can be a leader. All of you are leaders. All of you can, you know, take the reins and run in your own spaces and sort of, you know, be that drop in the pond that has that ripple effect with your personal communities. And so hopefully everybody sort of embraces that and takes that on. Okay. So the things you can share are to get rid of the neuromyths. And if you want, you can, the neuromyths are in that first QR code. You can look at that whole thing on neuromyths. If you want, you can share the information that has to do with the principles, these 6 few things that people actually all agree is true about human brains. And if you'd like to see that, there's a short video on every single one of those. That's in the other QR code that I already gave you. And you can share tenets. These are things that are true about all brains, but there's huge range of human variability. You know, everybody needs to be motivated or to sleep, or, you know, all of those things, have good nutrition. All of these things influence learning, but there's a huge range of human variability, and we need to take that in consideration. These things aren't controversial. These things are out there and they've been used a lot. So if you, those are things we can share with people. But I just want to, as you go out into the world and sort of move, you know, mind-brain education forward, retain that humility. We are just beginning. You guys are so lucky. You are at the very beginning of a massive change in education. And this is so exciting, but retain that humility of, you know, things change. We have to stay up to date. It's on us to make sure we are getting the best and the most up-to-date evidence in order to make these recommendations to teachers. And so I would just say, just stay humble as you do that. So teeny bit of background about me, a little bit about where we've come from, why I think we haven't come faster to some other place. Some of the recommendations I would have teachers do: get rid of neuromyths, learn about principles, learn about the tenets. And now I'd love to listen to any questions you might have.
All right, thank you so much. We have one comment in the chat, but please put your questions and comments in there. We'll definitely have time for that. Tracey, we normally ask about the impact of our guest work, and it's a tough question for you because your work is so broad. But we like to think about what is the highest impact or the most impactful change that you see doing the work that you do. In your work, it's so broad, so I don't know. Is that too broad to speak to?
I'd say one kind of hokey answer and one kind of what I tell everybody else answer, I would say, I think that, well, in terms of a very specific impact, I know a lot of teachers really liked my book, Making Classrooms Better, or Bringing the Neuroscience of Learning to Online Teaching, because it has very specific teaching interventions that were supported by evidence from the learning sciences. And teachers really love that, and they embrace that, and they use it a lot. And so I'd say that's been very helpful, because it's actually in class, front lines, how to use stuff. But I think, personally, what I think, I really believe in quantity, not just quality. And I believe in something called a committed sardine movement. I think that education has got this terrible inertia of going in one direction until you get one or two people go in the other direction and saying, hey, wait a minute, we got to go somewhere else. This is not working. This is not working for us. And then when you've just got enough of a mass, you've got movement, and you've got people changing the course or the direction of education. And so what I really hope I can share with each and every one of you is that you feel it's a superpower. It is a true superpower to actually know this stuff and to bring it to your classrooms. It changes lives. It can really make a huge impact. And so if you can appreciate that one is enough, change begins with one, and that's you. It just begins with you. I know that everybody's worried about why isn't the field, moving. Well, we are the field. We get to move. And as we move, I think it will move everything else forward. So hopefully, I think, if anything, I think I help people feel that they are making a change by using this information. I would hope. So that would be what I would, sort of cheesy way of saying that. I think there's a little bit of a drop in the pond there.
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's lots of thank yous coming in through the chat as well. I wonder if you could comment on a comment that somebody had about making a distinction between knowing how the brain works and knowing how the mind works. I don't know if the person who wrote that wants to follow up at all, but what's your perspective on that?
I think that's a great question. And the reason we do call it mind brain education, and the B actually was biology brain. It was a lot of behavior. There's a lot of big question marks, but what should B be? And brain won out because, genetically speaking, the influence of brain on the formation of the influence of genes shaped what the brain was, and the brain was the end story. So brain won. But anyways, the brain is the physical and the mind is psychological. So I'll give you a very concrete example. I don't know who wrote that question, but and I can actually look. What's the name of the person who wanted to know that?
Pamela Klinkenbeard.
Ellen?
Oh,
It was
no,
Or go back to the previous one? Okay.
I don't know. I just wanted to ask about mind and brain. That was you. Okay. So here's a really concrete example. The reason we split these is because there is a distinction. A really concrete example is the difference between emotions and feelings. Emotions are of the body. They are neurochemical exchanges. They make you experience something in your body. That's an emotion. The feeling is your psychological adaptation to the reaction you give and the behavior you habitually do based on the emotion. And so you can always experience emotions, but you can change how you deal with your feelings, right?
Yeah.
So they are different things. Mind and brain are distinct elements, and they both are very important to consider in this conversation.
I think that comment emerged from when you said it was important for teachers to understand how the brain works.
Oh, okay.
And I think that it's also, and perhaps more important, for teachers to understand how the mind works. And that was the motivation for that comment.
That's a very good one. And I'm going to tell you a terrible personal bias. I think the brain gives birth to the mind. And that is, I don't want to do philosophy with you, but that's what I think. I mean, you can, if your brain's not functioning, you don't have the mind. And so anyways, I sort of think that there's I don't want to say it's not a hierarchy, and I don't want to go into philosophy, but I do see they are inextricably linked, but they do have different elements, and teachers need to be aware of them. Because, for example, in the example I just gave you about emotions and feelings, it's an incredibly powerful lesson that you can give to teachers. Teachers are always doing, emotional intelligence with kids, or let's, try to get it, what's so fascinating is when you tell them the neuro element that they didn't know. So, Johnny, I know right now you're ready to punch out, Tom, because he took your ball. Cause and effect. I named the motion. I named the motion, but then you say, so what do you want to do about it?
Right.
You have a choice. So the feeling is your choice. Same thing. Growth mindsets. If you tell people, oh, let's all have growth mindsets, and everybody's like, yeah, sure. If you tell the kid, you know what? Your brain cannot not learn. Did you know that? Your brain is always learning. So actually, it's inevitable that you should have a growth mindset because your brain is changing all the time anyways, right? So when you give them that extra element of the explanation of what's going on in the brain, we can support the psychological concepts that are already accepted and used in classrooms right now. And I think it can tip some students into embracing that a little bit quicker. Okay.
Thank you. Fantastic. We have so many good questions coming in. I'm just going to go in order. The next one is, how can we as researchers and practitioners foster teacher buy-in when they are suffering with burnout?
So buy-in and burn-out are two different contrasting kinds of things. So you're saying that teachers are too overwhelmed with their current jobs to be able to assist you, Anna, in research projects, or what was
Oh,
the?
sorry, it wasn't a clear question. I was thinking more so in the way of how do we foster them of creating a community where teachers are excited to learn about the science of teaching and the science of education when they are already at such capacity.
I think that one of the best things that I've found, or the best ways, and this has to do with any kind of a classroom setting, right, is to start where they are. For example, you could just ask a really quick question. Okay, so how does stress influence learning? Oh, I can tell you, I can't even think straight when I've, let them vent, get it all out and all the rest of it, but also jump on that and say, wow, and is stress always bad? Oh, okay. Yeah, but actually there's positive stress, there's eustress, and then there's distress. And so how do we as teachers sort of ride that wave of that Goldilocks moment for every single kid in our class and manage the stress level in the right way? That's a really good question, because it can seem, and if we're feeling bad, let's talk a little bit about social contagion. Whew. If I'm feeling bad, you're feeling bad, because it's an automatic, transfer. The teacher sets the mood in the classroom, right? So sometimes not ignoring it, and just dealing with it and saying, and starting from where they are is really, really helpful, because it adds on some vocabulary. It helps them see that it's a normal thing. It helps them understand. One of the things I always tell teachers is, what's so fascinating is the brain is always trying to get back into balance. How balanced do you guys feel right now? Where are you feeling out of sync or out of balance? And when they start to talk about emotional states or other things, it's very easy as a segue to then begin to nurture their understandings about the roots of that feeling, what it can do, how they can manage those things. And I think it's much better than just starting with your agenda. It's starting with theirs. This is why the whole concept of doing research in this field really has to be a co-construction of knowledge. That's what the commas are all about: mind, comma, brain, comma, education. We're trying to get everybody to be working on an even playing field, to support each other. And basically, you can even be there doing that. I'm here to support you. And I'd like to know, one of the things that you're faced with in your class that we could be researching. I want to research X. What do you want to do too? So that it's a win-win thing for teachers.
Excellent. Well, Pamela has a very interesting question about the hybrid professional role in MBE. So she's a semi-retired educational psychology professor developing her identity as a translator between teachers and neuroscientists. So any advice
Pamela,
there?
you got to enroll in my class. You would just love it. We have so many people just like you who come to the neuroscience of learning course at Harvard, which is open to undergrads, graduates, and non-credit. And so we've had a lot of non-credit people join in who come from this angle, who want to understand how can you walk the talk in all of this. So you are a post professional. You've already done this. You've already had a job. You've already, you know, had a fulfilling life as a educational psychologist. Now to dip into or feed your own curiosity about neuroscience would be wonderful to sort of balance out that information. The best person to answer this would probably be Kristen, because she went from education to you know, neuroscience capacity sort of in a quick shoot and a real, you know, dunk in the pond really quickly. And as I have several students that have done that same kind of a path. I'm not sure what you mean by my take on this. I think it's great, but and I also think if you are, I don't know, Pamela. I don't see, where is Pamela? I don't see a Pamela here. Anyways, I was going to try to have a gate. Is Pamela retired or no? She's just, she is retired.
I am semi-retired.
You're semi-retired. Oh, there you are. Okay. You're semi-retired. Okay. So just so that you know, I firmly believe, I hope you get a chance to read this article. It's called the Harvard's 60-year curriculum. You should go to school until you die. So basically keep learning. This is a wonderful idea. And I think that you will bring a lot of rich experience to the field, because you've got the frontline experience already, right? So what you're going to be doing is now learning the other end of the theoretical part of things. So yeah, it's a great idea. And not joking, join my class. It's a good way to sort of put your feet in the water and decide if you want to be in this or not.
Thank you.
So much for self-promotion. Sorry about that, but I'm trying to think. There's other programs you can do, and there's some certificate programs. And if you really want to do neuroscience, Janet Dubinsky's got a wonderful program at the University of Minnesota where for teachers in the summer, you do a lot of stuff like dissecting sheep brains and other stuff like that, like real neuro, like really getting into it straight away. And it's all for teachers. So if that's the direction you want to go, that's one way.
I've talked with Janet. One of my issues, I actually did a poster on this at IMBUS, and one of my issues is, okay, so how much neuroscience is enough? My PhD is in educational psychology. I don't have any formal neuroscience training. So it's just an interesting identity question.
I'm going to ask Kristen to say something about this, because this question every year at the end of my semester-long class, 15 weeks of being in this, and I get 6-7 students who say, oh my gosh, I'm going to change my career. I'm going to go into this. I'm going to go into mind education. I'm going to go and do neuroscience or whatever. And we bring back some alumni, including, and when Kristen got this question last year, exactly that. And if I'm not mistaken, the bottom line answer is basically, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know how you can know things. And this is the key to understanding this research element. Are you willing to learn how to research? Which is why people love taking my class, because that's exactly what they do. Because we ask you, what do you want to know? And then we make you learn the research skills and transdisciplinary research. If you know those skills, you can survive. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen. Is that what you said, or was there some? What are the other nuanced answers?
No, I think that's it. And being 3 years into my program, my advisor is trained in cognitive neuroscience. And I think in the education field, like at conferences and things, I'm wary of presenters who lean very, very heavily on the neuroscience. So I think, you know, recognizing what you do and do not know about, or what science does and does not know about the brain, recognizing your own limitations, to me, builds credibility. And I think it would be tough to find somebody with a degree in neuroscience who also proclaims to be an expert in all things about the brain. I mean, it's just not, even people with those credentials are not experts on it all. It's just far too complex. So recognizing your own limitations is a strength, not a weakness, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And your ability and your desire and your interest and your willingness to learn how to get those skills. You know, how do you find information? Are you willing to read in this translational way that I mentioned? Are you able to learn a bit of the other language? I work with Daniel Ansari and Shashank Varma on creating, for a psychologist, neuroscientist, educator, can we create a single glossary for mind-brain education? And we did, and we have one, and we use it. I should have put that. I'll put the link in that Google Drive for you. But we have a basic vocabulary. We think everybody should understand the word neuroplasticity. Okay, great. Everybody should also understand that feedback means different things in neuroscience from education. You know, what are the definitions that are used? And so we put all those things in. We said, this is basic vocabulary. Here's whatever it was, 250 words. If you know these things, then you'd be able to have those conversations, right? And I think, as Kristen says, this intellectual humility is a very important thing. You know, I know what I know, but I'm not staying in my lane. Somebody wrote that in the chat. I really like that. You know what you know, but you know, that doesn't mean you have to stay put, you know, in one space. You can definitely go beyond that. So I just encourage you to do that. If you want, we also have a list. I'll also put that in the link. I am on the board with Kristen on the American Educational Research Association, the special interest group on neuroscience and education. We have a link to academic programs, journals, glossary of MBE, and conferences and stuff that are around this topic that we can share with you guys.
And we are coming up on time. 12:15 will be our set end time, but we have a few more questions. Samira, do you want to just voice this one verbally? I know it's something that we've been talking a lot about. You're next in the list.
Sure. So Chris and I have a shared interest in this area. And one of the things that I've noticed is we've done some research in the field. The field has done some research in trying to look at the practical benefits of training in initial teacher training or professional development training, and even with counselors. So educators across the board across their career. And so I wondered, you know, what if we have any consensus, or if we're moving toward a consensus of what practical benefit is, like how we operationalize it. I lean, as someone who doesn't know what they're doing and is brand new, I lean green and wet behind the ears in terms of decision making. To me, that makes sense because that's how we use it as an educator. So I wanted to know what your perspective was on that. If you had a different take, because, well, a
different take about whether or not you should be doing this?
No, I'm sorry, that wasn't clear. A different take about how we could operationalize what a practical benefit is for an educator.
So I would I have kind of a, I showed that thing about getting rid of neuromyths, then teaching the few things we know are true about all brains, all cultures, all ages, all subjects. For example, neuroplasticity exists. Okay, that's one of those things. All new learning paths through the filter of prior experience. I mean, there's some few things that are true for all brains. But then there's tenets, which are harder to do unless you know your students. But I would do a pre-step and then a post-step. The pre-step to me is huge because it's really, really, I did this yesterday and it was awesome. But I had this group of 100 university professors, and I started off by just saying, why is it so hard for people to change their beliefs? Talk with the people in your table. I mean, okay, so come up with these things. Then I explained what cognitive ontology is. How does your brain lock into bias and heuristics and, you know, shortcuts, and, you know, why is it that we habituate ways of reacting to things, and talked about cognitive load and why it's hard to invest energy to learn something new. And then when they were all primed and all ready, and I said, okay, so what I'm going to tell you is going to be hard because it's going to ask you to question some of your beliefs. You're going to doubt some of these things. I'm going to show you evidence. You can show me your evidence too, and we can sort of discuss this, but nothing changes if you still believe the myths. If you still think crazy things about men's and women's brains, and I'm telling you all this other stuff, it doesn't matter what I tell you. It doesn't matter how much evidence I show you. If your belief system is locked into something, you're not going to move. And that's the biggest problem that I have found with teachers, is that they cherry pick what they're going to believe or not believe based on what they already believe. So the very first step I would do is to help them prepare for, you know, clashing with their current beliefs, and understanding why they might believe what they believe now, and understanding how we find good evidence. There's another chart I'll drag in there that has to do with how do you find good evidence, you know, if then. If it's a peer-reviewed article, then is it done on the same population? If it's, you know, if then, to help you sort of figure out, is this good evidence that I'm looking at or not? So that would be the first thing. The second thing I really like is to share information. And if you look at our webpage, thelearningsciences.com, we publish in English and Spanish all basic information. So there's a video, like I said, on every single principle and every single tenet. And what we like to do is just give that to the teachers beforehand. We flip the encounter. Have a look at this. You know, I see, I think, I wonder. Come back and tell me. What did you see? What do you think? What do you wonder about this now? And let's dig deeper in that way. And so you're helping them know what they want to know, not just what you want to share with them. I also don't teach the principles and tenets straight out. I do a true and false question. I do it around myths and stuff like that, so that, you know, then we land on the true answer and they realize, oh, that's why it's true. That's the evidence that's there. And then they buy it already, instead of me just saying, here's the stuff you need to believe. It's much better for them to discover it themselves. So if you'd like, we have a whole bundle. In the Harvard class, we don't have a textbook. We have rotating bundles. So we update our bundles every year. We have about 100 of them now, which, you know, on memory attention. We have one on teachers, teacher education, teachers. We have a huge one on mind brain education, but we have several bundles that have about 100 different peer-reviewed articles that we update every year to make sure that people have the best information possible in the field. So if you're interested in looking at the ones that we have related to, there's one, it's called, I think it's called Teacher Expectations and Learning Outcomes and stuff like that, or whatever. But if you're interested in other materials for teacher training, go ahead and look at the learningsciences.com and look at resources in English, and then mind brain education. Okay. And I want to just, I think I'll end by just letting you say, just telling you guys, I'm going to put my last slide one more time. I am your ally in this, man. I love people who care about this, who want to make a difference, who are willing to do something hard, who embrace the complexity of mind brain education, and who are willing to, you know, professionally think, you know, of launching yourself into this space. Please keep in touch. And if you have questions, remind me where we met, you know, formulate a really clear question. The more precise you are, the easier it is for me to respond. And I'm very happy to stay in touch and give you, if we have materials or things I can do to support your work, I'm very happy. Totally zero on the ego of anything. Just use the information wisely, cite your sources, and if I can support you in any way, just let me know.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We know that you have a flight to catch. There are still a couple questions hanging out in the chat, but please maybe send them along to Tracey with a little bit of an intro, and we'll do our best to get back to you. Thank you so much, Tracey.
If you didn't get your question answered, please just send me an email and I'll have a look at that in the next couple of days. And if you don't hear from me within a week, it's not because I'm blowing you off. It might just be like I'm looking at our phone, I opened it up, I forget it, and then so remind me. If you don't hear back, always remind me. It's not obnoxious. I really need that. Kristen knows that. She's a TA in my class. I need to be reminded constantly of where I'm supposed to be. So please just do that, and I'm happy to support you any way I can.
All right, and please keep an eye on the INBIS Twitter and website for our December AMA. The date is to be confirmed. All right, thank you so much. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks a lot. See you.